Welcome to Art and Object's first important paintings and contemporary art catalogue of 2014. It's a catalogue that we're very proud of, a really interesting selection of contemporary work and some really major works by our best known artists. We're on view currently at Art and Object 3 Abbey Street in Newton, of course. We have just this past weekend had an exhibition of 5 of the canvases by Colin McCann at the McCann House in Titirangi, and that was really a wonderful event to see those works in situ where he painted some of those in the mid-1950s. All of the works that we're going to talk about here, and of course all of the works in the catalogue, you can view online, www.artandobject.co.nz, and we'll be on view daily until the auction this coming Thursday at 6:30.
For this video this time I decided that rather than talk about some of the things which needed to be talked about or which I should be talking about, I was just going to pick some of my favourite paintings. And this Milan Merkasic called Painting 2 Blue is one of the paintings that I've become the most attached to in my time at Art and Object. Sometimes the things which hit you first and which appeal to you the most are the things which maybe over time reveal themselves a little bit too quickly and you don't get that long sustained love of them. I think this painting is just exactly the opposite. I feel confident in saying whoever's lucky enough to own this painting is going to get something out of it every single day of their lives. It is the most generous act of painting, really. It is pure abstraction, of course. There is no reference beyond paint and canvas. The artist has thinned down their paint to an extent that he has been able to masterfully manipulate the surface. Through the process of dyeing and using rapidly drying acrylics, he's been able to build the surface up very slowly over numerous layers and create this wonderful surface in which you can just lose yourself in for hours. And it's not unlike being a child and staring into a pond. It's always changing and you're always seeing something new.
Think global, act local. It's a corporate mantra we hear from time to time in the business world, but it's very much the guiding philosophy of the buying collective, the Strip Club, which operated from 2004 to 2014 this year. The Strip Club was formed to really be a cutting-edge buying collective of works that artists to exhibit on Auckland's K Road, literally just around the corner from us here at Art and Object. And the 30 works of the collection in the catalogue form a really tight snapshot of some of the edgier contemporary practice in New Zealand over the last 10 years. One of the defining themes of New Zealand contemporary art practice in the last 10 years has really been pushing the boundaries of painting. A few new chapters that have been added to that conversation, of course, we think of the work of Rowan Whelans, of which there is a work in this catalogue, but also artists like Sungnulo and Miranda Parks, whose work Trigger is hanging just above me here. And it's a lovely voluptuous sculptural relief canvas, really pushing what painting is to the absolute edge of sculpture. Samantha Mitchell is another artist who's added a chapter to the book on contemporary painting in the 21st century, because her works are all painted on perspex, on the inside of the perspex. So they present this lovely, glassy, perfect sheen to the viewer. Her work sits in the area of pop culture, street culture, and so you will see many figures. Here's a young Michael Jackson in this work from 2007. This exquisitely rendered work above me here by Liz Moore is entitled The Rose from 2004. And it is an example of an artist of supreme technical skill in the service of redefinitions of quite traditional imagery. Here we have the rose, a thing of beauty, a classic rose, but it's a bit creepy, it's a bit mysterious. It's bleeding, or there's blood on it, and there's other sorts of secretions or accretions drizzling and drooling from the rose, making it an altogether transformed entity.
Two of my favourite works in the catalogue are by Ralph Hodary, and I know auctioneers and auction houses are very prone to hyperbole, but really I think these two are certainly among the best works by Ralph Hodary that I have ever seen. Taken together, they do much to reveal just how important he was and how many different strands there was to his practice. Starting with the work on the right, which is of course one of his iconic window paintings, what they're generically known as, is this one here. It is called Black Window towards Aramoana, and it is just so superbly resolved. It was shown at the RKS Gallery along with a whole lot of the windows in 1981. I guess the first sort of collective public airing of this body of work. It blends an expressionistic painterly style with a minimal, more refined surface. Two types of painting which don't really exist together comfortably historically. Of course, the great genius of this work was to take the window frame and re-examine the way that we look at paintings. Hodary questions the way that we look at an artwork, the way an artwork is cut off from the rest of things we live with, the way we treat it in such a specialist, privileged way. And he produces these innately beautiful objects, but he wants them to exist in our lives, not in a special cut-off way, but in the same way as, say, a fridge freezer or a television or a window. The work on the left is particularly special. It's a work that has been housed in a museum for a number of years and is now being made available on the market for the first time. It's particularly special because it is the first song cycle banner the artist ever completed. So you can see that it's a little bit different from other works in this series. The artist perhaps hasn't quite worked out that important area at the top and at the bottom as well as he might have as the series goes. But again, like the windows, there's a real passage of discovery that's on show in this work. The palette is particularly unusual. It's got that wonderfully burnt umber, rusty orange and red so deep, which of course he gets through staining the canvas. These works, of course, in the conception of them, Hodary used to dangle them over the banner at Carey's Bay, literally getting the weather into them, creating a surface beyond just paint on canvas, something that is a landscape in the literal sense of the word, letting the land into the work. And the truly generous acts, these paintings, they move and breathe and live, and that's the way they're conceived, so that they themselves dance.
This is one of the most magnificent and vibrant canvases by Alan Maddox that we've had the pleasure of offering. This is Rhythm Grid from 1976. It's a work full of tension. I think the secret to Maddox is the tension between the relentless grid structure, the use of the cross or the X, and the freedom of the handling. This work is really interesting because it's so clearly annotated. Now I think Alan Maddox, along with Phil Claremont, have become categorised slightly as the wild men of New Zealand painting. They really lived the rock and roll artistic lifestyle. But I think that this shouldn't divert us from the fact that Alan Maddox was a deeply informed student of modernist painting, and of course in particular abstraction. And the title here I think is a dead giveaway, because one of the reference points I think for Maddox's work of course is the musical score. The grid structure in many ways has a mathematical structure to it, very much like the musical score. And of course by naming this work Rhythm Grid, I believe that Alan Maddox is contextualizing himself within a great tradition of abstract art as it relates to musical notation. And of course, the granddaddy of that conversation is the great abstractionist Vasily Kandinsky.
I do enjoy installing these shows and putting them together and putting works beside other works and creating conversations that you don't necessarily see when the work's on their own. But in the case of the Merkazich, which I've just talked about, and this absolutely gorgeous Macan, they're occupying their own little autonomous spaces, and it's kind of like they need that. This particular painting encapsulates so much of what Macan was on about in the mid-1970s. It is, of course, Clouds number 7. A little bit similar to Noughts and Crosses, these works apparently have their roots in the most mundane and charming and familial event of the artist walking with his grandchildren on the west coast of Auckland, and them noting that the clouds in the sky looked and felt like rocks in the sky. And Macan, of course, has taken this as a starting point and worked through, of course, one of his favourite subjects, the 14 Stations of the Cross. And in doing so, I think the artist turns the painting into a journey. And this is obviously something that post his trip to America in 1958 was a literal journey. He started making paintings to walk by, large paintings. Here, it's more a mental and a spiritual journey. And the artist equates his own journey as a painter with the journey that Christ took in his crucifixion. But for me too, I can buy into this journey. The process too of viewing a Macan is not dissimilar to that same process. It's a long process, sometimes it's an arduous process. Sometimes you're completely and utterly lost, and sometimes, if you're patient enough, they reveal themselves quite beautifully.
As and when you do come to the exhibition this week, one work that I urge you to take some time to examine in detail is the work chosen for the cover illustration of the catalogue, which is Simon Ingram's Spirit Level painting. It really is a delightful amalgam of untouched found object in the form of this builder's spirit level and a flat plane of yellow applied to a bonded plywood substrate. It's a work that very slyly and knowingly talks to colour field abstraction and Duchampian found objects. And it's a work that is located within a discourse of contemporary art that looks at the absolute lightest touch by the artist to transform the subject matter and the object into one.